The year was probably 1939, when I was 6. I remember going across the ferry towards Island. It was dark, and I remember the boats on the water. And on the Bluebell and the Trillium, a double-ended ferry going to Center Island. My dad had rented the cottage on 3rd Street. I remember the man's name that owned it. It was Pocklington. I think we only stayed there for 1 season, because the next I remember we had our own cottage at 2 Channel Avenue. The island was our home from May to October. We lived in the city during the winter. Memories of the island are much more vivid because it was much more fun being on the island. I went to the island school, but only lasted for a half a day. I came home crying because I couldn't do the work. It was a 1-room schoolhouse, and what I didn't realize then, each row was a different grade. I could do the words when the teacher was in front of my row, but by the time she got to the grade 8 row, I was in tears. At 7 to 10 years old, during the summer, we had supervision on Ward's Island, which was like a daycare with a lot of activities for both boys and girls. It was held near the shelter building, beside the ballpark. In our teens, the boys would hang out on the beach, and in the evenings we would spend a lot of time playing ukulele, trying to master the George Formby songs and the way he strummed the ukulele. There was 2 significant events that I must tell you about. The Great Water Fight of 1949. There was about 12 of us that hung around together, and on one day behind the shelter by the water fountain, somebody took a Dixie cup and splashed water in Donna Mae's face, just as a prank. Donna Mae Pierce later became my brother's wife. She in turn splashed back. Then somebody got a saucepan and splashed somebody else. Then it became a pail of water. Then the water fight spread to the Wyman Annex building, where there was a tap and a hose. Everybody got soaked. But it didn't end there, because I was looking after the bowling green that summer, and it had keys, and I opened up the 3-inch hose. We got into real trouble for that one, because we nearly ruined the bowling green. The next event for me was life-changing. When we were sailing, I was winning most of the races, maybe because I was the lightest sailor. So it was decided to load my boat with sand ballast to equal the weight of the heaviest other sailor, who was 220 pounds. With all of that dead weight, I stopped winning races, and I became quite upset. And on one of my outbursts, was sent to the cottage to cool off. As I was looking out the window, everybody was having fun except me, and I felt that nobody liked me. I think this was one of my personal turning points, and the moment when I grew up. Besides the sailing, baseball was a big thing, and we had 5 teams. The Osaweezies, the Oddazels, the Brownies, the Trojans, and the Dingbats. I wasn't a very good baseball player. I could never remember to keep my eyes on the ball when it came near me. I ended up always dropping the ball. On one occasion, I was playing right field. They put me there where I would do the least amount of damage. And on a high fly, I ran over to center field to try to catch the ball. I jumped up and hit my teammate in the face, knocking out his front teeth. I was about 17 and he was over 6 foot tall, a brain surgeon, and over 40 years old. Not one of my better days, nor his. Penny covers some of the island life in her book called Peril on Pier 9, an accounting of the Noronha disaster of 1949. There was another couple of memories of note, and one of them best forgotten. One foggy and miserable night with the foghorn blowing, Ken Lai, Beans, George Stein, and I went down to the ferry docks. I got on Ken's shoulders. We got a big overcoat and I put it on, so together we looked like a 12-foot Frankenstein. Beans tucked another coat on his back and looked like a hunchback, and walked like a deformed cripple. He was imitating Frankenstein's friend Igor. We went to the end of the dock at the water's edge, where with the fog we couldn't be seen. We didn't have to wait long before we heard footsteps, obviously a young lady who came to take the ferry, We walked out of the fog as if we rose out of the water and looked so grotesque she screamed, turned, and ran. I've never ever heard a scream like that before. It was blood-curdling. And then there was George Stein's bike. He called it his trusty steed. It had only half a handlebar, one pedal, no seat, just the post, and he was the only one who was able to ride it. He would ride it all the way over to Center Island, to Borden's Dairy Bar on the main drag. The good part is, he never had to lock it up. One of the big events on the island was the annual masquerade, where all of the children and adults would get dressed up and parade in the park near the shelter. And Leslie would always run the proceedings.
Chip McDonald, I say, shit. You look beautiful. Suffering. And she's a gypsy fortune teller. He is a gypsy fortune teller. That's going to affect his entire life. Just ruin the kid's entire life.
Another event, which couldn't happen today, was the annual minstrel show. Everybody would put on a black face, like Al Jolson, and do comedy, music, and songs, and skits with deep South humor. Merle came to the island in the summer to babysit her cousin. This is where I first saw her. She also sang in the chorus at the minstrel shows. Oh, there was another event I forgot to tell you about.
Watch it, Brad. Hang on to your hands. Here we go. Ready for this? Come on, Stewie. Come on, Stewie. Ow! Oh, he's hurt.
There's some power there. Oh my God! Oh yes, that's where the bicycle was. Oh, oh the bicycle's gone. That's great. Where the hell is it?
My dad sold the cottage in 1953 to Percy Salzman, who was the weatherman for CBC Radio. He was famous for being able to write backwards on the weather maps because the green screen technique had not been invented yet. Actually, it was patented in the 1800s, but not widely used in the 60s. Green screen, or chroma key, is the way I'm making these episodes. In 1963, the cottage we no longer owned but still loved washed away into the bay due to high water. We used to say that we were 101 miles from Toronto. We were only 1 mile away by water, but 100 miles from the city. But sadly now, 6 foot deep. It was such a great place to grow up.
Yeah. All right, he's going to impact the water. Oh, yeah. It's a big explosion. No dog.